Hello, this is Miles Catlett, and I want to talk to you about JavaScript variables. So a variable is really a representation of a value, or an expression, or an object. Could be just about anything. So, for example, I can set a variable equal to something, and then log it in the console. Whoops. Just like that. Now, this is kind of a no-no. It doesn't, this will work in JavaScript, but you're not supposed to do it. What we really need to do is declare the variable. So there's several different ways we could do this. We could use const. This sets it as a constant. And what that does is it keeps us from being able to change the variable. So if I try to set variable equal to something else, it will give me an error. Now there's another way to do it, which is to use let. Now if I use let here, it will allow me to do this, and it will log it as the latest value, which is 3. So if I'm doing something like a loop, I want to use let for that. I made a little typo here. No, not what I wanted to do. Well, I is less than 10. I was wondering why it didn't print anything out. So now we're printing out all the values, and we can make this less than or equal to, so we can see 10 as well. So now we're going from 0 to 10. And we're logging I each iteration through the loop. So this is a for loop. We can talk about loops and for each function a little bit more later on. But if we try to use const here, we'll get an error after the first iteration of the loop because we're not allowed to change the value of I. But this lets us change the value. So another thing we can do is we can use the keyword var. And we can, by the way, set a variable to whatever we want. It's really nice because we don't have to repeat things like long lists. But what happens when we use var is we run into some issues. One of the things is that var, if it's created in this base level of the script, it will create it as a global variable. And so it'll be a part of the global object. And if we want to maintain some kind of scope, this is not a great thing. Things can get, if we declare the variable more than once, which is another thing we can do with var. So we can say var is equal, we can say var my variable again, which we're not supposed to be able to do. And then it's going to give us the latest value. So if we were to use any other declaration, we would get an error here. You can't redeclare, but you can redeclare if you use the var keyword. But what happens here is we may have multiple scripts on a page. We may have multiple declarations of my variable. If that happens, this is going to overwrite this value that we need for something else. And it's just going to get also very confusing. So these are some of the reasons that we don't use var, and we tend to use const and let only. We can also declare variables in arrays or lists. So we can say x, y, z equals 1, 2, 3. And this is going to declare the variables x, y, and z so we can go through and we can see what happens, and we get all three. So this is another way to declare variables. And this is called destructuring with arrays. And that's all I'm going to teach you about variables right now. Hopefully this gives you a nice summary of what they are and how they work in JavaScript.